Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, another busy day at the winter meetings. The Cody Bellinger era in Los Angeles is over. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some more pitchers coming off the board, which further reduces the Dodgers' options for their starting rotation. And Dave Roberts met with the media at the winter meetings and had some interesting things to say on several topics that we are going to touch on. So that's the plan. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio. We're doing a split episode today, so I will be with you for the first half. Vince will be with you for the second half. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning, and we really appreciate you being with us. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love to bump up all those subscriptions, and we appreciate it. If you're new, if you came to us because of our crossover with the boys from Dodgers Nation, welcome back. We appreciate that. I really like Doug and Clint. I work with them every single day. Great guys, great content. And like I said on yesterday's show, there is plenty of room for multiple Dodgers podcasts, especially in the offseason. What else are you going to do? There's no games to watch. Just listen to a bunch of Dodgers podcasts. And, be sure to listen to ours and then watch it on YouTube or vice versa. Whichever order, doesn't matter. Just bump up the numbers, Anyway, Vince and I were both at the winter meetings again on Tuesday. We spent a lot of the day together. We're recording separately, as I mentioned, because he and I are both done with our winter meetings for the year. I am back at my parents' home in Lake Elsinore. Vince is currently driving back to his home in LA. And so that's our plan for today, doing the split episode. I know that in Vince's segment, he's going to talk specifically about Dave Roberts' comments about the Dodgers not having as much intensity as the Padres in the NLDS, and some thoughts around that. So that's what he's going to talk about. But for me, the big story on Tuesday was the Cody Bellinger era coming to an end in Los Angeles. The Cubs signed Bellinger for 1 year, $17.5 million. So basically, Bellinger got about what he would have gotten in arbitration for the Dodgers. It's just a different team paying it. And when the Dodgers initially decided to cut tie or to non-tender Bellinger, my hope was that they would bring him back on a smaller deal and that he would find things and be happy in LA and sign a long-term deal after he had figured things out, et cetera, et cetera. But it pretty quickly became clear that there was enough demand for a guy with Cody Bellinger's talents. He's 27 years old. He's a former MVP, former Rookie of the Year. Legitimately in 2019, he was the best player in baseball and one of the best players we've seen in a long, long time. He's still that guy. He still has that talent. And so it turns out there were a lot of teams willing to take a flyer on that talent and hope to get him back to what he used to be. Because if he's anything like 2019, $17.5 million is a steal. But then once enough teams were interested and got involved, then it became clear that he was going to get quite a bit of money, which didn't necessarily rule the Dodgers out. The Dodgers have plenty of money, but if they wanted to pay Cody $18 million, they would have just tendered him. And they didn't want to do that. And so it kind of became clear that he wasn't coming back. And that became a for sure thing on Tuesday when we found out that he had agreed to a deal with the Cubs. And it's a good deal for Cody. I'm happy for him getting a lot of money. I think Wrigley Field will be a good place for him. Playing the outfield, it's in center field, it's a pretty easy place to play the outfield. Obviously, the ivy on the walls is a little bit of a thing to deal with, but right and left field both have weird nooks and crannies at Wrigley Field. Center field is just pretty much a regular center field. It's not an overly large field, and so I think he'll do defensively and offensively, depending on the wind and the weather. But Wrigley Field is often a good place to hit. And so for a guy like Bellinger, who his goal is to reestablish his offensive value, it makes sense. There was talk that Bellinger also met with the Giants and the Blue Jays this week. Blue Jays make a lot of sense. They play in a bandbox, all that stuff. We know they need outfielders, and we knew they were interested. Giants made less sense to me for reasons I've probably explained before. That if your goal is to try to re-up your offensive value, go into a place where hitters struggle, not the best idea. But the flip side of that is if he had gone to San Francisco, if Cody really does figure things out and get back to what he used to be, no stadium's going to hold him anyway. And it might look more impressive for him to have his offensive bounce back in a tough hitters park like San Francisco. But in the end, he went with the Cubs, probably because he offered the most money. That's how free agency works. He got a 1-year deal to reestablish his value. Maybe he'll be back to the Dodgers someday. Probably not, but stranger things have happened maybe. And I'm like I said, I'm happy for Cody Bellinger. I'm hopeful for Cody Bellinger. I really like Cody Bellinger. I appreciate all the things that he did for the Dodgers. In 2020 when they World Series, they don't win that without Cody's home run in Game 7 of the NLCS, the one that ended in his shoulder injury. That was the game winner that sent them to the World Series. He hit another homer in Game 1 of the World Series, the game I was at. It was a lot of fun. Cody Bellinger was a key part of that 2020 championship team. He was obviously a key part of 2019, the team that set at the time their franchise record for 106 wins. He won the MVP. He was awesome. 2017, he was awesome. A huge part of the team that won 104 games that year, and he was the Rookie of the Year. So many great Cody Bellinger moments over the years that they can never take away from us. Right now, they make us kind of sad because we're remembering a version of Cody Bellinger that doesn't currently exist, but I'm hopeful that that version of Cody Bellinger could exist again. I hope it does. I want Bellinger to be successful, and obviously not against the Dodgers, but in general, I want him to be successful because I have fond feelings towards Cody Bellinger. I don't think the shirt I'm wearing right now is a Bellinger shirt, but I do have a couple Bellinger shirts, and I will continue to wear them because I will continue to love Cody Bellinger. So it's sad that he's not a Dodger anymore. Dave Roberts found out that Bellinger wasn't a Dodger anymore basically during his press conference. That was kind of, so he didn't have a lot of time to process, but you can tell by his answers that he's been processing it. I think he saw the writing on the wall too and knew that the time was done, but he had nothing but well wishes for Bellinger. Also, it's a sad time. If you look back at 2020, there's only really Kershaw and Barnes from the really big contributors. Obviously, Bruce Grado. Sorry, not 2020. From the 2017 to 2018 World Series teams, it's just Kershaw and Barnes. 2020, obviously, there's more. There's Mookie. There's Gratterall. There's some of those guys. But even the 2020 team, Seager's gone, Jock's gone, Kike's gone, Bellinger's gone. Bueller's out right now. Not gone, but out. A lot of they still have some of the key ones with Will Smith and a lot of those guys, but baseball changes. And Jerry Seinfeld famously said, "We root for laundry," and this is a very good example of rooting for laundry. Whoever replaced Cody Bellinger, we're going to root for them. Dave Roberts said the Dodgers will be looking for an outfielder, especially one who can play center field. I don't know who that'll be. Brandon Nimmo is the only real center fielder who's any good on the free agent market right now. So maybe they're going after Brandon Nimmo. But if Bellinger's getting $17.5 million, Nimmo's going to want more than that because while Bellinger has the higher ceiling, Nimmo has the benefit of having been good the last 2 years, which Bellinger wasn't. So it'll be interesting to see what the Dodgers do in center field. Dave Roberts did say they'll address it, but who knows how? And that's going to be one of the big storylines to watch the rest of this offseason. So farewell to Cody Bellinger. We love you. We'll miss you. And good luck with everything except when you're playing the Dodgers, as always. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about a couple starting pitchers who signed with other teams and continuing to come off the board and continue to create questions as to what the Dodgers are going to do with the rotation and some comments that Dave Roberts had about that topic. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. At Locked On Dodgers, we believe home should be where you and your family feel safest, especially over the holidays. This season, give yourself and your family a gift of peace and protection with the #1 rated home security system, SimpliSafe. And right now, SimpliSafe is offering Locked On Dodgers listeners 40% off a new security system. But don't put this off. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, a third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 a day. That's less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional installed plans. One of the reasons I didn't get a security system for a long time is because I thought they were super expensive. I thought that was something only real grown did. But it turns out if you do it right, it's not that expensive, and you and I can both be real grown-ups. So don't miss your chance to save big on our favorite security system. Get 40% off any new system at simplisafe.com/lockedmlb today. That's SimpliSafe, simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, I am back. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every week morning. When you're done with this, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. The Dodgers have been looking for starting pitching this offseason. We got Clayton Kershaw back officially. That's great. Other targets who we thought they might go after, Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom signed. We've already talked about them, although we didn't talk much about Verlander signing on yesterday's episode, at least on the Locked On Dodgers portion. We did talk about it on the Blue Heaven from Dodgers Nation podcast, that half of our crossover. But, Verlander is with the Mets now. deGrom is with the Rangers. We'll get a couple more on Tuesday. Andrew Heaney, who there were rumblings that the Dodgers might be interested in bringing him back. He signed with the Rangers too. Taijuan Walker signed with the Phillies. Jameson Taillon signed with somebody, the Cubs, I think. A lot of these pitchers keep coming off the board, and it's making fewer and fewer options for the Dodgers. Right now, the Dodgers have Julio, they have Kershaw, they have Gonsolin in May, and then they have question marks. They have, you have three guys who pitched in the big leagues last year who are starters: Ryan Pepiot, Michael Grove, and Andre Jackson. You have two other guys who are top pitching prospects who finished the season in AAA, who are starters: Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone. So that right there, that's 9 guys to fill a 5-man rotation. And yet the Dodgers probably want to add at least one more starter, maybe 2 still. And so, there's Carlos Rodon on the market. There's Kodai Senga from Japan. And then there's, Chris Bassett's still out there. There's several pitchers still out there. And Dave Roberts hinted that they might try to do something like they did with Tyler Anderson, find a guy who they think is undervalued and help him turn great. Obviously, if they could just do it on demand, they'd do that all the time because that's the cheapest way to do it. But, that's a good goal to have. He also talked about Bobby Miller, though. Bobby Miller is their top pitching prospect. He pitched AA and AAA in 2022. He was actually better in AAA than he was in AA. His walk rate was better. His strikeout rate was about the same between 2 places, but because of the better walk rate and slightly better hit rate, he was a much better pitcher. Had an ERA like 3.25-ish in AAA. Not a world beater, but that's pretty darn good, especially in the Pacific Coast League, which is a hitter's league. Bobby Miller looked really good, struck out a bunch of guys, 150 something strikeouts in 112 innings overall in the minor leagues. Just really, really solid season, and he's got great stuff. We saw him in the futures, and we saw him in spring training last year. He has got the stuff. He struck out Shohei Ohtani in the Freeway Series. He looked great in the futures game. His fastball's electric. He's got great off-speed stuff. Just he has the potential to be the total package. And one silver lining of the Dodgers missing out on some of these pitchers is they might be forced to give Bobby Miller more starts than they would have otherwise, which might mean that by the time October rolls around, he's a seasoned professional and ready for the pressure of October. And if that's the case, that would be pretty awesome. So, but Dave Roberts said that Bobby Miller is going to pitch in the big leagues in 2023. He said how much he'll pitch, that's up to him. And what he means by that is pitching well. Obviously, it's not actually up to him. Bobby Miller would say, I will pitch all the time, please. But, basically his performance will dictate how much he gets to pitch in the big leagues. And I do think that bar for performance might be lowered a little bit because of their lack of starting pitching, to say, you know what, we we have a solid team. We're going to win some games with our offense, and we are going to let Bobby Miller take some lumps in the big leagues so that he can get through that and become a starting pitcher who can really, really contribute to the team in the stretch run and October of 2023. I think that would be awesome. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. We don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And based on Dave Roberts' comments, it doesn't seem out of the question. Dave Roberts had other comments too. He talked about not having as much intensity as the Padres and the NLDS. Vince is going to talk about that. He talked about Gavin Lux, said that they're very comfortable with Gavin Lux if he is a starting shortstop, but also not ready to commit to that yet. It sounds like that's not their plan A, but they are okay with that if it does come to that. And beyond that, it's a lot of stuff that Dave Roberts talked about. One of the things about the winter meetings is so many things happen that we're trying to keep this to a half hour a day. We're not just a news report. We're not gonna summarize everything that everybody said on the show. We're gonna talk about some key points and our opinions on those things. So that's what I've done here. A lot more though. Be sure we'll talk more over the next several days. Now, other things that Dave Roberts said, I'm sure there will be hopefully news to talk about as the Dodgers start making moves, which they haven't really done yet. So that's going to do it for me for today. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. It really does mean a lot to me. And Vince will be along in a minute.
Yo, Dodger fans. Vince here to close out the episode. And like Jeff mentioned, I'm here to talk about some comments Dave Roberts made at the winter meetings, talking about playoff intensity and the difference between the Dodgers and the Padres in the postseason. And I'll just start off with the quote. He was asked about whether the Dodgers might have lacked intensity appropriate for a playoff series in the NLDS. Dave Roberts said, quote, I think there's some truth to that. As a manager, you never want to say that somebody wants it more than you, because I think that speaks to the preparation part of it, the mental part of it. But I will say that you look at that dugout versus our dugout, there was more intensity there. That sense of the ultimate sense of urgency each pitch, I think that we're going to make sure that that's noted, because I do think in retrospect, postmortem, kind of looking at it, I sensed it. So that part of it, I think I certainly take ownership of for sure. And he also went on to say that the Dodgers don't have an October problem just in general. So, but it was interesting because it wasn't something I ever expected the Dodgers to, or anyone on the Dodgers to kind of really admit. We talked about this and, playoff intensity and having fun in the dugout and everything else. And, it comes down to the Padres looked like they were having more fun because they were winning, and that's how it goes. But it's also a matter of, it's the playoffs, and you do need to you don't need to, I guess, live and die with every pitch, but you do have to have, like Robert said, a sense of urgency on every pitch. Every pitch matters. And, especially in that series with the Padres is, 2 to 3 plays or hits or moments shifts that whole series. One big hit in game 2 for the Dodgers and they win that game. The not giving up those hits in game 4, and that doesn't really have to do with playoff intensity, I don't think. But I do think that, it's visible that sometimes the Dodgers are a little bit different in terms of their mindset and mentality and, the way they go about things compared to other teams that they play sometimes. And, if Jeff was here, he would for sure be on the other side of it and be like, it doesn't matter. He'd rather have, good players rather than intense players and everything else. But, I do think it plays a part into it. I do think, these Dodgers last year were a different type of team, and they've had these types of teams before, but I don't know. You'd like to see a little bit different, mentality or maybe not mentality, but you'd maybe like to see that. And I don't even want to call it intensity. It's just, I don't know. It just seems, sometimes it seems like the Dodgers are pressing because they won 111 games or whatever they're expected to win, and they have that pressure, and then it kind of collapses. Where sometimes they come in and play some of these teams. The last 2 years they've lost to teams that didn't win 90 games, and yeah, those teams got hot. They had, key moments and key hits and key situations that went their way. But they also play with a little bit more, they play a little bit more freely, at least it seems, because they don't have that pressure maybe. And, there's really no way for the Dodgers to avoid that for the most part. I don't think they should intentionally make their team a 90 win team or a 95 win team or 88 win team, whatever it is. But I do think, personality wise, and this is going to come a little bit as the Dodgers get younger and kind of shift to some new guys, is, the Kikes and the Jocks and Puig back in the day and all those guys, they were fun, they were big, they were, big personalities. They brought some fun, but they also were good. And especially in the postseason, Kike had a bunch of big hits in the postseason. Puig had a bunch of big hits in the postseason. Jock had a bunch of big hits in the postseason. And that's kind of, you're not going to be able to just find that combination like, oh, this guy is, like Hans Alberto, fun, brings the fun to the dugout, he keeps everything loose, everything else. Didn't make the postseason roster. So, it's guys like that. But then now we got, you're getting a little bit of a youth movement with Miguel Vargas and, possibly, Gavin Lux stepping into a bigger role. And then, Michael Busch, guys like that coming up. Yeah, Bobby Miller potentially coming up. And those guys could be those personalities or, just maybe don't know any better type of mentality. That's also kind of part of it. Like, just looking at the last 2 years, the Padres, Machado had been to the playoffs, been to the World Series with the Dodgers. But other than that, a lot of those guys either hadn't been to playoffs or, hadn't been successful in playoffs and, or were part of 2020 playoffs, which were a little bit, different in terms of they lost to the Dodgers and, they didn't have the full success that they've had. And you look at the Braves the year before, they were an 88 win team in the playoffs, kind of playing with house money a little bit. And they had a bunch of guys that came over midseason that helped them out, Rosario, Soler, Jock. So even all those guys that were there the year before, when the Braves blew the 3-1 lead to the Dodgers, they had other guys to supplement that also were hitting well and playing well and, helped them win those certain series. Eddie Rosario helped them beat the Dodgers. Jock Peterson helped more in like the first round. Jorge Soler was World Series MVP, guys that helped out. And then you look at the Padres, Trent Grisham sucked all season and then was good in the postseason. And he already, has a little bit stronger personality or more of a hype mentality. And when he's good, then he gets to accentuate that because, he's able to celebrate and stuff like that. So, all in all, when I posted the video of Robert saying this stuff and, a lot of people were saying, oh, like, why did the Dodgers still hire this guy or, whatever else, Dave Roberts took it on the chin. He said that he believes that he'll take ownership. I mean, he said that he'll take ownership for this and that kind of thing. But I've never managed a Major League Baseball team, obviously, but I've managed a Little League team in a few years, 4 or 5 years in a row. I've managed Little League team, or not managed, but, Little League coach. And sometimes you get teams that are just naturally, excited and hyped and, cheering on teammates and, into the game and intense and, those teams are fun. And then sometimes, a couple of years I got teams that the kids just never figured it out. They never, got that intensity. They never seemed to be fully into the game. And those years weren't as fun. And the Dodgers as a whole aren't like that. They're not like, oh my God, these guys or whatever. The Dodgers do have personalities. They do have, they did win 111 games. It was a lot of fun. They had, celebrations and the knocking on the head and everything else. But the manager can only do so much. And Dave Roberts said that about, not extracting or not taking guys out of who they are. If there's a player that just doesn't get hyped like that or doesn't handle the way, or, he doesn't play that way, you can't force him to do that. And that, and I don't think the Dodgers have any like true players like that intense or that, stuck in the mud or that, boring, I guess. But collectively, I think they try to have a different mentality, and it tightens you up a little bit. And I think playing, 111 wins, you're expected to win. You're playing the Padres. The Padres had a goal of, the Dodgers' goal was to win the World Series, and maybe they had that goal ahead of win the series first. The Padres' goal was to beat Dodgers, and being on the field and around, players and coaches at that time during the playoffs, you could see the Padres side. They wanted to beat the Dodgers, and some of the, things I heard when, coaches or players were talking to other coaches or players or to, somebody they knew or whatever the case was, like, they wanted to beat the Dodgers. They were going to bring that intensity. They were going to bring everything else. And the Dodgers, I don't know if they had that same mentality, like, we want to beat the Padres. It's more so like, we want to get to the World Series. The Padres are one of those teams. Okay, let's beat the Padres. I don't know if that, energy was reciprocated in terms of we want to beat the Padres. Now, if they play each other again, next year in the postseason, I think revenge, all that kind of stuff. So, like, it can go both ways and it's, happened before where the Dodgers have played with intensity or more fun, or, it looks like they want to, whatever the case is, play harder. And I don't even think it's a matter of playing harder. It's just a matter of the way you are approaching the game and the way you're going into it. And yeah, I do think the Dodgers could benefit from having a little bit different mindset, mentality, whatever, there's no set word because I don't think the Dodgers mindset was wrong. The Dodgers were trying to win the games, and I don't think their mentality was wrong. I just think, whatever in playoff intensity, hype, whatever, there's some combination of all those words is kind of what I would have liked to see. And yeah, it's very possible that, if the Dodgers don't go, 0 for 20 with runners in scoring position and they go even 5 for 20, then it wouldn't have looked that way as much because the Dodgers would have been having more fun and the Padres would have been losing, and, it would have been a little bit different. But I think the combination of that and I do think sometimes when the Dodgers go down in the postseason, or, when, the writing's not on the wall, but when they're in a tougher situation, it has seemed like it's hard to build it back up or get it back up. And it might be a matter of, they exhausted so much energy to get to a certain point, and then after it doesn't work, and you're just like, well, damn, like, you're like, 2018 World Series, devastating Game 4 loss, and then Dodgers come out in Game 5 pretty flat, and it didn't work out. I don't think, I don't want to be like, oh my God, the Dodgers don't know how to come back and win, because they've come back and win and they've done stuff like that in the postseason. But it's just a matter of, they start to add up, and that's the biggest part. Dodger fans, yeah, we're spoiled. We've seen the Dodgers in the playoffs the last 10 years. We've had varying degrees of success in those 10 years, obviously. And I think it just does add up. And then you try to find the things of like, they need more intensity, they need more this, they need more that. But I do think the intensity thing has a point. I do think, and I don't know if it's intensity because there's different, ways to interpret that. I do think it's just a matter of playing a little more free and relaxing a little bit, and just, the playoffs, everyone's playing with house money. There's no guarantees. There's no, the better team doesn't always win. And if you look back at it, the better team definitely wins a majority of the time, but I don't know if it's a significant majority of the time to where it's, you feel comfortable. And I don't think any team should ever feel comfortable heading into the postseason. So, I think with the youth movement, maybe they'll bring in some guys that have a little bit, different personality, and that kind of gets them going. Maybe Mookie Betts, switches Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, they talk things out, or they figure it out, and they're like, okay, maybe, we can have our personality. I don't think they need to change their personalities. I just think the way that it was represented in October could maybe, benefit from a little bit of adjustments, and just be like, okay, look, like, maybe we could have done this, or maybe we were too laid back, or maybe we were like this, whatever the case is. So yeah, I'm glad Dave Roberts said this, because it had been a talking point of fans, and we talked about it on the podcast and everything else. And I think I feel more comfortable them acknowledging it than not acknowledging it and saying, oh, that didn't have anything to do with it. I think acknowledging certain things that maybe had an impact on the series should be acknowledged and should be like, okay, now, I don't think that, Dave Roberts is not going to be like, okay, next year you guys need to be rah-rah all the time and blah, blah. And, I don't think that that's the solution. I just think it's like, hey guys, let's go out there and let's have some fun. Let's be intense. Let's be on every pitch. Let's, focus 100%, not that these guys weren't doing that, but it's just a matter of having it out there. So appreciate Dave Roberts for being candid about it, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be a long time before we can discuss this topic again, because it won't be a something to talk about. It won't be a discussion point until next October. So that's going to do it for my part of the episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube, search for Locked On Sports Today. You can also search for Locked On Dodgers in those places and subscribe to Locked On Dodgers if you haven't already done so. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car, or if you're at home, tell your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.